Invertebrates are critically important to human and natural systems because they dominate the planet.
There are probably 5 to 10 million species of insects in the world.
There are more insects than there are any other type of organism.
You wipe all the insects and invertebrates off the planet and the planet would literally certainly have to change, but it would really die in terms of the way that we recognize it now.
Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da.
Without insects, we wouldn't have a lot of the birds, mammals that we have today. Insects are a very important food source for so many animals.
In 1987, Edward O. Wilson, E.O. Wilson, wrote a paper called The Little Things That Run the World. And in that paper he had a very simple message. He said if insects were to disappear, life as we know it would change dramatically. Why is that? Because insects really do run the world. They pollinate 80 to 90% of all the plants, so if they disappeared, we would lose our flowering plants, then we would have food web collapse. So all the food webs that support the reptiles, amphibians, birds, mammals would end, so they would disappear. Our decomposers would disappear, so rapid recycling of nutrients would end, and yes, humans would disappear as well. They could not live in such a world.
So we've known for quite a while that natural habitats around the world are vanishing as human civilization advances, agriculture development. And so there is a backdrop of all sorts of species declining in abundance as we replace where they live. Now, on top of this, there have been some recent studies in some remaining natural environments that are a bit disturbing in that they show a decline in insect fauna over time. The media reports paint this as being very global, and unfortunately, because there are so many insects and so few people studying them, we really don't have a great idea for most parts of the globe. The picture that those studies paint is indeed disturbing, but we're on kind of shaky ground when we try to extrapolate all that out. Nonetheless, the results are stark enough that I am concerned.
There's a growing evidence that we are experiencing insect decline, at least in some parts of the world. That's primarily due to the habitat loss. Even habitat loss and habitat fragmentation. Even if we preserve a part of a beautiful forest such as this one, if it's in isolation, it becomes an island that cannot be repopulated by insects and other organisms if we lose them here in this original location.
What's frightening is I think we don't know what will happen if we continue to experience declines. And in a lot of cases, you know, if just thinking of bees, in Ohio we have about 500 different kinds of bees. We don't know a lot about many of those species. We don't know all the species that are there. We don't know how many there are, what kind of habitat they need, and so we may have already lost species that we weren't even aware of. So I don't think we can project forward and say what the impacts will be. We don't have a baseline for most of the insects on the globe. We don't know how many there are, where they are, and what they need to thrive.
One of the worst human inventions ever is probably the classic American lawn. If we could replace that with natural vegetation, we immediately create a corridor of natural habitat in every suburban environment. Any homeowner in the US or elsewhere has the capacity to make a significant contribution to conservation.
If you have a yard, this basically means maybe don't mow twice a week, maybe mow every 2 weeks. Maybe don't preemptively apply a pesticide. Just wait until you see you have a problem and you know what it is.
Homeowners use twice as many insecticides, the amount, as we do in agriculture, and almost all of it is unnecessary.
If you use a product that's a general insecticide that kills all insects, you're killing beneficial insects. You're killing honeybees, you're killing pollinators.
We don't know what widespread use of insecticides mean, both around our homes, in our homes, and reflected in farm fields and natural habitats. It's, I think, a little arrogant to say we understand all the impacts, because I don't think we do.
We need to put the plants back. We need to cut the area we have in lawn in half, at least, and we have to replant those areas with the plants that support insects. And not all plants do that. As a matter of fact, most plants from someplace else are very bad at supporting insects.
Our native fauna, our native insects, tend to like our native plants. So many cities have a good local nursery that sells locally adapted plants, and your local insects will love these.
Even small steps can make a big difference. And if we back up and we think from a bee's perspective, our environments are like a patchwork. They live in one place and then they forage out from there. So if you have a few flowers and I have a few flowers and the park has some natural habitat, pretty soon there's enough there for bees to survive with. So I think it's important to not to underestimate what a little step can make. It means a lot to the long-term health for everybody to add a few plants, to add a few rows of habitat.
My name is Nancy Miarelli, and I am an entomologist, which means that I study bugs, and I live in Quito, Ecuador. And I specifically do insect tourism. In Ecuador, we have about 59 national parks. I think that's the last number that I remember. So we have 59 national parks, and most of the Amazon is protected by the government. But there are some areas of Ecuador that are what I consider to be like forgotten gems. That would include things like the cloud forest and down to the coast of Ecuador, where there are some national parks, but there is massive amounts of deforestation as well. So some of this deforestation, I mean, it depends on the elevation you're at, but anything from mining to agriculture, especially palm oil, coffee, chocolate, bananas. And so for me, like obviously, we all like coffee, chocolate, and bananas, right? So what I really like to focus on is how can we live sustainably, like how can we do these farming practices sustainably, and also talk about conservation. This lodge that we're at in El Séptimo Paraíso, this was inherited land and would probably have normally been used for agriculture. However, the owner was like, no, like a lot of the cloud forest is being deforested. I'm going to make a conservation stand and make a lodge and provide ecotourism options. And a lot of people in Mindo, especially this area in the western side of Ecuador in the cloud forest, really looked at what they had, really looked at, how people, especially tourists, were coming in and being like, wow, this place is so amazing, and decided on their own to buy patches of land and really do like zip lining and birding, hummingbird gardens, things like that, butterfly gardens, to support tourism, to support money, to support keeping the land like as intact as possible. I really like it because it's not just the government, it's like people here have really found and feel responsible for what happens to the land here. And communities in all of these areas are working together to make a large contiguous patch of forest that different people from different communities are buying and putting together in like a little patchwork. It's really cool.
We are learning more than ever about the natural world and how the universe functions, and yet most people don't know about it. They don't find out about it. It's part of a scientist's duty to be able to translate those discoveries and findings for the general public who may not be as versed in the scientific language as they are.
We're doing a project called the Ohio Bee Atlas, where people go out with their phones and they take pictures of insects, and that it gets loaded into the cloud, and experts weigh in and help with identification. And just the act of doing that, of being more observant, more interested, helps people appreciate more of what's around them, and also feeds into a greater data set that helps scientists to say, this park seems really key. We see a lot of bee species here, or there are a lot of flowers here. This is an important place to protect. Or conversely, we're not seeing so many species here. What might we need to do to kind of help some of the organisms in that area? I think helping both children and adults have a greater awareness and appreciation for insects is really key.
want to catch a bug, you have to, if it's on a leaf, you have to hold your hands out and take your hand and pull it, and then it's in your hand, and go tell your mom or dad to go get a container. I like collecting bugs because you can collect all different kinds of bugs that you maybe never seen before. We caught 3 spiders, 2 tiny ones and 1 big one. I used to think that they were just boring and gross. Now I actually think that they're more interesting.
My neighbor used to babysit me, and when I was there, she had a garden in her front yard, and I would take her jars, and there would be bumblebees flying all around the flowers, and I would catch them, and I'd bring them inside, so then I would have, like, I'd be there for a whole day, and I'd amass a collection of a bunch of different kinds of insects I caught out at the flowers. Being closer to bugs has made me less afraid of them.
Bugshot started by Alex Wild, who's a well-known insect photographer, and he and I knew each other, and he approached me about the idea of starting a photography workshop with both a combination of insect professionals that wanted to learn how to take better photographs and kind of insect enthusiasts that were just getting into not only learning about insects but taking better photographs.
I'm really skittish, especially around spiders. I've been asking everyone if this thing bites or, you know, if that one bites. But seeing all these people getting up close to these bugs and shooting them with the camera, of course, it's really changed my mind about a lot of bugs. I feel a lot safer around spiders, for sure.
A lot of people don't get out into the world. They don't get to see these insects. And you stand back from a distance and you look at an insect and you say, oh, it's a bug. But when you get in and you get really close to these insects and you're looking at them at a huge magnification, they're incredibly beautiful animals.
I think photography can play a big role in changing the perception of insects and other arthropods, spiders in particular, for people, because it allows them to see them like they've never seen them before. Macro photography, you know, takes a glimpse into the amazing life of these things that most people have a casual have a casual glimpse of at best. And so just showing these things up close, showing how neat and cool they are, and little glimpses into their behavior, I think can help people to relate to them better.
Most people see insects as little tiny things that are to be stepped on or swatted away. I believe that people who hate insects, whether it's intuitively or they've learned to hate them because they've been bitten, once they see a beautiful photograph or film of an insect up close, they're going to have a new appreciation for it and maybe not want to kill it.
I think all of us have an interest in insects starting off life, and some of us lose that, but I think the age of digital photography and these workshops and all of these opportunities to share photographs in social media these days really is serving as a resurgence in natural history amongst the general population, and I think that's fantastic.